The stars had always seemed beautiful to Captain Maria Santos. She had spent 20 years looking at them from the bridge of various ships. But tonight, as she stood on the observation deck of the refugee transport, those same stars looked cold and empty. Behind her, 300 survivors huddled in blankets. They were the lucky ones. They had escaped New Valencia before the Vethkai sealed the planet. 300 out of 10 million, the screen on the wall flickered to life. Maria wanted to turn it off. She knew what was coming. The Vethkai had announced they would broadcast their lesson to every corner of the galaxy. But she could not look away. Her sister was down there. Her nieces. Her mother. The broadcast began with Commander Vrethsan standing before a crowd of human prisoners. He was tall, covered in dark green scales, with yellow eyes that showed no emotion. His voice was calm, almost bored, as he spoke. "Humans of the galaxy," he said. "Your species refused a simple request. You refused to give us what we wanted. This is what happens when inferior species forget their place." The camera moved across the detention zone. Maria saw thousands of people packed together like animals. Children crying. Parents trying to shield them. Old people sitting in the dirt with empty eyes. She searched every face, looking for her family. Vrethsan continued speaking. "We gave you a chance to be reasonable. You chose pride over survival. Now watch what your pride has cost you." What happened next would haunt Maria for the rest of her life. The Vethkai soldiers moved through the crowd with weapons drawn. They did not rush. They took their time. They separated families first. Husbands from wives. Parents from children. The screaming started then, and did not stop. The executions were systematic, row by row, section by section. The Vethkai commentators spoke over the footage like they were describing a sporting event. They made jokes about how humans cried. They laughed when children called for their mothers. Maria found her sister in the crowd. Elena was holding her 2 daughters close, trying to cover their eyes. A Vethkai soldier pulled the children away. Elena fought. She scratched and bit and kicked. The soldier broke her arm and threw her to the ground. The children died first. Elena watched. Then it was her turn. Maria did not scream. She did not cry. Something inside her simply turned off, like a light switch being flipped. She stood perfectly still and watched until the broadcast ended 3 days later. 10 million humans died in those 3 days. The Vethkai killed every single person on New Valencia. They recorded everything. They wanted the galaxy to see. They wanted humanity to understand that the Vethkai were superior and humans were nothing. Admiral Elena Vasquez commanded the nearest human fleet. She had 17 ships against 400 Vethkai warships. She could not break through. She could only watch and record. Her communication officer begged her to turn off the feed. She refused. "Record every face," she ordered. "Every Vethkai who smiles. Every officer who gives an order. I want names. I want ranks. I want everything." Her crew obeyed in silence. Many of them had family on New Valencia too. When the broadcast ended, Vasquez addressed her fleet. Her voice was steady, but her hands shook. "Remember this day," she said. "Remember every face. Remember every name. Remember how they laughed. Every name." On Earth, people gathered in streets and homes and public squares to watch. No government told them to. They simply came together, drawn by some ancient instinct. They watched in silence. Cities that never slept went quiet. The whole planet held its breath. When it was over, something changed. Politicians who had argued for years suddenly agreed. Old enemies shook hands. Differences that had seemed important yesterday meant nothing today. Earth spoke with one voice for the first time in 300 years. The Galactic Concord sent ambassadors 3 days later. They came with serious faces and careful words. They expressed their sorrow. They condemned the Vethkai actions. They promised to investigate, but they also warned humanity not to respond. The Vethkai were one of the founding species. They had been in space for 50,000 years. Their fleet was the largest in the galaxy. War against them would mean war against the entire Concord. President Yusuf Okonkwo listened to every word. He was an old man, tired from years of politics. But as he listened, his eyes grew hard. "You want us to do nothing," he said when they finished. The lead ambassador, a tall being with gray skin and 6 arms, nodded carefully. "We want you to be reasonable. The Vethkai have agreed to pay compensation. They will return the bodies. They will return the bodies." Okonkwo's voice was flat. 10 million bodies. 10 million human beings murdered for entertainment. And you want us to accept compensation. President Okonkwo, please understand. The Vethkai are powerful. Your species is young. You cannot win this war. Okonkwo stood slowly. He was not a tall man, but in that moment he seemed to fill the room. "Get out," he said quietly. "President, get out of my office. Get off my planet. Tell your Concord that Earth has heard their message. Now hear ours." He leaned forward, and the ambassadors stepped back without meaning to. "We remember every name. We will remember every face. And when we are ready, we will come. Not in anger, not in haste. We will come with purpose. And we will not stop until justice is done." The ambassadors left Earth that night. They reported to the Concord that humanity was emotional but weak. They would grieve and eventually accept reality. Humans were soft creatures, ruled by feelings. They would calm down. On New Valencia, the Vethkai raised a monument to their victory. Commander Vrethsan received a promotion and a medal. He gave interviews about the successful pacification of the human colony. Meanwhile, on Earth, something was happening. Factories that made consumer goods quietly switched to military production. Scientists who had studied theoretical physics began working on practical applications. Soldiers trained in secret facilities built underground. Admiral Vasquez was promoted to Supreme Commander. She accepted the position with 3 words: "I am ready." She carried a small data chip with her everywhere. It contained 10 million names. She had memorized every single one. The galaxy thought humanity was broken. The galaxy was wrong. Humanity was not mourning. Humanity was preparing. And when they were ready, the stars would burn. 7 years passed after the massacre of New Valencia. To the rest of the galaxy, it seemed like humanity had accepted defeat. Human ships disappeared from trade routes. Human colonies went quiet. Human diplomats stopped attending Concord meetings. The Vethkai celebrated their victory. Commander Vrethsan became a hero among his people. He wrote a book about the taming of humanity and toured Vethkai space giving speeches. He told his people that humans were weak, emotional creatures who broke easily under pressure. "They hide in their little corner of space now," he said in one famous interview. "They know their place. They learned their lesson. This is what happens when inferior species challenge their betters." The other species in the Concord moved on. There were trade deals to make, borders to negotiate, resources to harvest. The death of 10 million humans was unfortunate, they agreed, but the galaxy was a harsh place. Species rose and fell. It was the natural order of things. But while the galaxy forgot, Earth remembered. In the first year after the massacre, Earth's government made an announcement. All human colonies would be consolidated. Non-essential civilians would return to Earth, or the 3 oldest colony worlds. The outer settlements would be evacuated. To the galaxy, this looked like retreat. Humans were pulling back, making themselves smaller, accepting their weakness. Vethkai analysts wrote reports about the psychological damage the massacre had caused. Humans were broken, they concluded. They would never recover. They were wrong. Behind the walls of silence, humanity was changing. Every factory on Earth converted to military production. Every university focused on weapons research. Every able-bodied adult either joined the military or supported those who did. There was no conscription. There did not need to be. The volunteers lined up around blocks. Old soldiers who had retired decades ago showed up at recruitment centers. Scientists abandoned profitable careers to work in government labs. Engineers worked 20-hour days without complaint. A young engineer named Thomas Wright was one of them. His brother had died on New Valencia. Thomas had watched him die on the broadcast, shot while trying to protect a group of children. Thomas did not cry. He did not rage. He simply walked into the nearest military research facility and offered his services. "I design propulsion systems," he told them. "I can make your ships faster." Within 3 years, Thomas and his team had created something impossible. A new drive system that let ships move through a dimension the Concorde did not even know existed. Human ships could now travel 10 times faster than anything in the galaxy. They could appear and disappear like ghosts. Similar breakthroughs happened everywhere. Weapons that could cut through Vethkai armor like paper. Shields that could absorb punishment, that would destroy Concorde ships. Communication systems that could not be intercepted or jammed. Admiral Vasquez oversaw everything. She slept 4 hours a night. She reviewed every report, approved every design, inspected every ship. Her officers worried about her health. She ignored them. "I will rest when we are ready," she told them. Not before. She still carried the data chip with 10 million names. Sometimes, late at night, she would sit alone in her quarters and read the names aloud. It took hours. She did it anyway. In the 4th year, the Retribution fleet began construction. 1,200 ships, each one built with a single purpose. They were not exploration vessels or cargo haulers. They were weapons of war, pure and simple. Each ship was named after a district of New Valencia. The workers who built them knew what they were creating. They worked in silence, but their hands were steady. Sometimes they would write messages on the interior walls before the panels were sealed. "For Maria, for my son. Remember New Valencia." By the 6th year, the fleet was nearly complete. Admiral Vasquez began training exercises in deep space. Far from any Concorde sensors, the crews drilled constantly. They practiced attack patterns, evacuation procedures, boarding actions. They trained until every movement was automatic. During one exercise, a young lieutenant asked Vasquez a question. "Admiral, what happens after we win? What do we do with the Vethkai who surrender?" Vasquez looked at him for a long moment. The lieutenant was barely 20 years old. He had been 13 when New Valencia fell. He had watched his grandmother die on the broadcast. "There will be trials," she said finally. "Justice, not revenge. We are not like them. And if they don't surrender, then we make them." The lieutenant nodded. It was the answer he had expected. In the 7th year, something unexpected happened. A Dranith diplomat named Kethrel arrived on Earth in secret. The Dranith were an old species, respected in the Concorde but never powerful. They had watched the massacre with horror. They had argued against the Concorde's inaction. They had been ignored. Kethrel met with President Okonkwo in a secure facility. He carried with him a gift. Detailed information about Vethkai military positions, fleet movements, and defensive capabilities. "Why?" Okonkwo asked. Kethral's large eyes blinked slowly. "Because what they did was wrong. Because the Concorde's silence was shameful. And because..." He paused. "Because we know what you are building. We know you are coming. And we believe you deserve to win." Okonkwo accepted the gift. He did not thank the Dranith. There was nothing to thank. This was simply one species recognizing another's right to justice. As the 7th year ended, Admiral Vasquez gathered her commanders for a final briefing. The fleet was ready. The crews were ready. The weapons were ready. "In 3 months," she told them. "We begin. The Vethkai think we are broken. They think we are hiding. They have spent 7 years laughing about how they destroyed us." She activated a hologram of Vethkai space. Hundreds of targets glowed red. "In 3 months, we teach them how wrong they were. We take everything from them, just as they took everything from us. Not in anger, not in haste, in cold, patient, perfect justice." She looked at each commander in turn. These were men and women who had lost family, friends, and homes. They had spent 7 years preparing for this moment. Their eyes were hard and clear. Remember why we fight, Vasquez said. Remember New Valencia. Remember the 10 million. Remember how they laughed while our people died. She straightened her uniform. The data chip was in her pocket, close to her heart. In 3 months, we show the galaxy what humanity becomes when you give us something worth fighting for. And God help anyone who stands in our way. The commanders saluted. In 3 months, the silence would end, and the galaxy would learn to fear the species they had dismissed as weak. The fortress station of Kethram floated in the darkness of space. It was the largest military base in Vethkai territory, home to 50,000 soldiers and 300 warships. For 2,000 years, it had guarded the border of Vethkai space. No enemy had ever breached its defenses. Commander Threlvos sat in the command center, bored. Nothing ever happened at Kethram. The last real battle had been centuries ago. These days, the station mainly served as a training facility and a symbol of Vethkai power. His communication officer looked up from her console with a confused expression. Commander, I'm detecting something strange. Multiple contacts appearing on the edge of our sensor range. Identify them. I cannot, sir. They're not matching any known signatures. They're... She stopped. Her scales went pale. They're gone. They just... vanished. Threlvos leaned forward. What do you mean, vanished? Before she could answer, the lights went out. Emergency power kicked in, bathing the room in red light. Alarms began to wail. Report! Threlvos shouted. Hull breaches on decks, 7 through 12. Internal sensors are offline. We're receiving distress calls from... The officer's voice cut off as static filled the channel. In the corridors of Kethram, human soldiers moved like shadows. They wore black armor that seemed to absorb light. Their weapons made no sound. They communicated through signals invisible to Vethkai technology. The Vethkai guards never saw them coming. One moment the halls were empty. The next moment, they were not. The humans did not waste ammunition. Every shot was precise. Every target fell. Commander Threlvos tried to reach his fleet. No response. He tried to seal the command center. The doors would not close. He drew his sidearm and waited. The doors opened. A human soldier walked in. Behind her visor, her eyes were calm and cold. Commander Threlvos, she said, you are being detained for war crimes. You will face trial. War crimes? He raised his weapon. I had nothing to do with New Valencia. You commanded the fleet that blockaded the planet. You stopped rescue ships from entering. 4,000 people died on those ships, while you held them outside the system. His scales went white. How do you know that? We know everything. She raised her weapon. Now drop yours. He fired. The shot went wide. Her shot did not. 11 minutes after the first human ship appeared, Kethram went silent. The Vethkai fleet was disabled. 50,000 soldiers were dead or captured. When Concord investigators arrived 2 days later, they found the station intact but empty. Every Vethkai body had been removed. Only one thing remained. A message burned into the wall of the command center. 10 million. We remember every name. News of Kethram spread across the galaxy. The Concord demanded answers. Earth said nothing. The Vethkai demanded revenge. Their fleets mobilized. They would find the humans and destroy them. They never got the chance. Over the next 6 months, human ships appeared throughout Vethkai space. They struck without warning and vanished without a trace. Military installations fell in hours. Supply depots exploded. Communication networks went dark. The Vethkai could not fight what they could not find. Their sensors could not track human ships. Their weapons could not pierce human shields. Their soldiers could not match human training. They were fighting ghosts. Admiral Vasquez commanded the campaign from her flagship, the New Valencia's memory. She studied reports from every engagement, adjusting tactics, identifying new targets. She slept little, she ate little, she lived for this. One evening, her aide brought her a message from the Concord. They were demanding a ceasefire. They wanted negotiations. What should I tell them? Admiral? Vasquez did not look up from her reports. Tell them to ask the Vethkai if they offered a ceasefire to New Valencia. Tell them to ask if they negotiated before killing children. The aide hesitated. Admiral, some of the other species are getting nervous. The Draneth support us. But others are talking about intervening. Let them talk. Vasquez finally looked up. Her eyes were exhausted but determined. We're not here to make friends. We're here to deliver justice. If the Concord wants to stop us, they can try. The Concord did not try. The destruction of Kethram had shown them what human technology could do. No one wanted to be next. Meanwhile, the Vethkai were falling apart. Their government blamed their military. Their military blamed their government. Citizens demanded answers that no one could give. How had humans become so powerful? How had they hidden their preparations? How were they moving through space in ways that should be impossible? Commander Vrith San, the architect of New Valencia, appeared on broadcasts urging calm. The humans are terrorists, he said. They strike from shadows because they cannot face us openly. When we find their fleet, we will crush them. 3 days later, his personal estate was attacked. His guards were killed. His home was burned. A message was left in the ashes. We found you. You're next. Vrethsan fled to the Vethkai homeworld. Vethra Prime. Surely he would be safe there. 14 billion Vethkai lived on that planet. The orbital defense grid was the most powerful in the galaxy. The home fleet numbered over 1,000 ships. He was wrong to feel safe. But he did not know that yet. As the campaign continued, something unexpected happened. Other species began sending messages of support to Earth. Not officially, no one wanted to anger the Vethkai, but quietly. Through back channels, the Draneth ambassador spoke publicly for the first time. We warned the Vethkai about humans, he said. They did not listen. Humans are not like other species. They do not forget. They do not forgive. And when they come for justice, nothing in the galaxy can stop them. The Concord condemned his words. The Draneth did not care. On Earth, people watched the reports with grim satisfaction. There was no celebration, no cheering, only a cold sense of purpose being fulfilled. The names on the memorial were being honored. The dead were being avenged. In her quarters, Admiral Vasquez pulled out the data chip. She had read these names 1,000 times. Soon, she would read them for the last time. We're coming, she whispered to the darkness. The fleet was gathering for the final strike. 1,200 ships, millions of soldiers, 7 years of preparation. Vethra Prime was waiting, and humanity was done being patient. The sky above Vethra Prime had been clear for 1,000 years. The Vethkai homeworld was the heart of their civilization. Protected by the most powerful defenses in the galaxy, no enemy had ever threatened it. No enemy had ever dared. On the morning of the attack, citizens went about their normal lives. Workers traveled to their jobs. Children attended their schools. Commander Vrethsan sat in his secure compound, surrounded by guards, confident that he was untouchable. Then the sky changed. 1,200 human ships emerged from nothing. One moment, the orbital space was empty. The next moment, it was filled with the Retribution fleet. Each ship was named after a district of New Valencia. Each ship carried soldiers who had spent 7 years preparing for this day. Admiral Vasquez stood on the bridge of her flagship, watching the blue-green world below. 14 billion lives. The largest Vethkai population in the galaxy. For a moment, she felt the weight of what she was about to do. Then she remembered the broadcast. She remembered the children screaming. She remembered how the Vethkai had laughed. Open a channel, she ordered. All frequencies. Her voice went out across the planet, heard by every Vethkai with a receiver. This is Admiral Elena Vasquez of the Human Retribution Fleet. 8 years ago, you slaughtered 10 million of our people. You broadcast their deaths for entertainment. You laughed while our children died. She paused. Below, she knew billions were listening in terror. We offer you one chance. Surrender Commander Vrethsan and every officer involved in the New Valencia massacre. Deliver them to us for trial. Accept responsibility for what you did. Do this, and we will leave your civilians in peace. The Vethkai High Council responded within minutes. Their message was defiant. They had 14 billion citizens. They had 1,000 warships. They would never surrender to inferior species. They would crush the human fleet and mount Vasquez's head on the walls of their capital. Vasquez listened to the response. Then she gave her orders. Begin. The battle lasted 6 hours. The Vethkai fleet was larger, but human technology was superior. Human ships moved in patterns the Vethkai could not predict. Human weapons tore through Vethkai armor. Human shields held against everything the defenders could throw at them. One by one, the Vethkai warships fell. Their orbital platforms exploded. Their defense grid collapsed. By noon, the planet was defenseless. Vasquez did not celebrate. There was nothing to celebrate. This was not victory. This was justice. Begin ground operations. She ordered. Priority targets. Military installations. Government buildings. And the list. The list contained every name of every Vethkai involved in the New Valencia massacre. Intelligence teams had spent 7 years building it. There were 12,000 names. Every officer who had given orders. Every soldier who had pulled a trigger. Every politician who had approved the attack. Human soldiers landed on the planet in waves. They did not attack civilians. They did not burn homes or destroy businesses. They had specific targets. And they pursued them with cold efficiency. Commander Vrethsan watched from his compound as the human ships blocked out the sun. His guards reported that human soldiers were approaching. There were too many. The defenses would not hold. Get me a shuttle, he ordered. I need to escape. Sir, the humans have established a blockade. Nothing is leaving the planet. For the first time in his life, Vrethsan felt real fear. He had killed millions of humans without a second thought. He had laughed at their suffering. Now they were coming for him, and there was nowhere to run. The compound fell in 20 minutes. Vrethsan's guards fought hard, but they were outmatched. When the doors to his safe room finally opened, he found himself facing a squad of human soldiers. Their leader stepped forward and removed her helmet. She was old, with gray hair and deep lines on her face. But her eyes were sharp and cold. Commander Vrethsan, Admiral Vasquez said, "You are under arrest for crimes against humanity." "This is murder," he screamed. "You're killing my people. You're no better than you." Vasquez pulled out a small data chip. This chip contains 10 million names. Every human you killed on New Valencia. I have memorized every one. Would you like to hear them? She pressed a button. Names began to scroll across the screen of her device. Thousands of names. Millions of names. These were teachers and farmers and doctors and children, she said. These were mothers and fathers and grandparents. These were human beings with hopes and dreams and families who loved them. You killed them for entertainment. Vrethsan's scales went pale. I was following orders. So were the soldiers who killed them. That excuse didn't save them. It won't save you. The trial was broadcast across the galaxy, just as the massacre had been. Vrethsan and the other captured officers were judged by a court of human and neutral alien judges. Evidence was presented. Testimony was given. The broadcasts from New Valencia were played in full. The verdict was unanimous. Guilty. The sentence was death. After the trials, the human fleet completed its work. Every Vethkai military installation was destroyed. Every warship was reduced to scrap. Every weapon was confiscated. The orbital infrastructure was dismantled. When they were done, the Vethkai were no longer a spacefaring civilization. They could not build ships. They could not leave their planet. They would survive, but they would never threaten anyone again. Some voices in the Concord called it genocide. Vasquez responded in a public statement. Genocide is the murder of innocents, she said. We did not kill innocents. We killed soldiers and war criminals. We destroyed military targets. The Vethkai civilians are alive. Their cities stand. Their children will grow up. She paused. We did not do to them what they did to us. We were better than that. But we made sure they will never do it to anyone else. If that makes us monsters in your eyes, so be it. We can live with that. The fleet withdrew from Vethkai space. Their mission was complete. Justice had been served. As her flagship left orbit, Vasquez stood alone on the observation deck. Below, the planet grew smaller. 14 billion Vethkai would wake up tomorrow in a world where they no longer ruled the stars. They would remember this day forever. She pulled out the data chip one last time. 10 million names. It's done, she whispered. Rest now. You are not forgotten. She did not cry. She had no tears left. But somewhere deep inside, something that had been wound tight for 8 years, finally began to release. The war was over. The dead were avenged. And humanity would never be dismissed as weak again. The galaxy waited. Every species, every government, every citizen watched to see what humanity would do next. They had destroyed the Vethkai military in months. They had brought one of the most powerful civilizations in history to its knees. Surely they would claim territory now. Surely they would demand tribute. Surely they would build an empire. Instead, humanity went home. The Retribution fleet returned to Earth in silence. There were no parades, no celebrations. Soldiers returned to their families without fanfare. Officers retired quietly. The ships were put into reserve, maintained but not displayed. President Okonkwo addressed the galaxy 1 week after the fleet returned. His message was simple. We did not seek war. We sought justice. Justice has been served. We have no desire to rule over others or expand our territory. We ask only to live in peace and to be treated with respect. He paused. But let the galaxy understand this. What happened to the Vethkai will happen to any species that harms our people. We do not threaten. We do not bluster. We simply remember. And when the time is right, we act. The Galactic Concord dissolved 3 months later. Too many species had lost faith in its ability to maintain order. Too many had been horrified by its failure to act against the Vethkai. A new organization formed in its place, built on different principles. The new Concord had one simple rule. No species could commit atrocities against another without consequence. The enforcement mechanism was not a fleet or an army. It was an understanding. If any species crossed the line, humanity would respond. No one questioned this arrangement. No one wanted to. On New Valencia, the colony was rebuilt. 50 years had passed since the massacre, but people returned. They built homes where their grandparents had died. They planted gardens over mass graves. They raised children in the shadow of memory. In the center of the largest city, a memorial rose from the earth. It was a wall of black stone, stretching for miles, covered with 10 million names. Each name was etched deep into the rock, visible from orbit. Ships passing through the system could see it glowing in the sunlight. Admiral Elena Vasquez visited the memorial every year until she died. She was 93 when her heart finally gave out. She passed peacefully in her sleep, surrounded by family. Her last words were a name from the list, her sister, Elena, who had died in the massacre. She was buried on New Valencia, facing the memorial. Her gravestone carried a simple message. She remembered every name. 50 years after the war, a young Dranath historian named Shelva traveled to Earth. She was writing a book about the conflict, trying to understand how humanity had transformed from a minor species into the most feared civilization in the galaxy. She interviewed dozens of veterans, politicians, and ordinary citizens. Most spoke carefully, aware that their words would be recorded for history. But one interview changed everything. His name was Marcus Chen. He had been 19 years old when New Valencia fell. His parents and younger brother had died in the massacre. He had volunteered for the military the next day. He had served throughout the war, from Kethram to Vethra Prime. Now he was an old man, living quietly in a small house by the ocean. His hands shook when he poured tea. His eyes were clouded with age. But his mind was still sharp. "You want to know why we did it?" he said. "It was not a question." Shelva nodded. "The galaxy still struggles to understand. You were a peaceful species. You had no history of conquest or empire. Then you destroyed the Vethkai in less than a year." Marcus was silent for a long moment. He looked out at the ocean, watching the waves roll in. "We didn't want to become what we became," he said finally. "Humans aren't warriors by nature. We're farmers and builders and dreamers. We want to explore and create and connect with others. Then why? Because they took 10 million people and laughed while they died." His voice was steady, but his hands tightened around his cup. Children. Babies. Old people who had never harmed anyone, they killed them for entertainment. They broadcast it to the galaxy and made jokes about our suffering. He looked at Shelva directly. His clouded eyes seemed to clear for a moment. "What would your people do if someone did that to you? If they murdered millions of your children and laughed about it? Would you accept compensation? Would you move on?" Shelva had no answer. "We did what we had to do," Marcus continued. "We became something terrible because something terrible was required. We lost part of ourselves in that war. Part of our innocence, part of our belief that the universe was fair and good." He set down his cup. "But we protected our own. We sent a message that will echo through history. We proved that humanity will pay any price, become anything necessary, to protect our people. And if that makes you monsters," Marcus smiled, but there was no joy in it. "Then, so be it. Better to be a monster that protects its children than a saint that watches them die." Shelva published her book the following year. It became the definitive account of the war. The interview with Marcus Chen was reprinted across the galaxy. Species that had never thought much about humans read his words and understood something important. Humanity was kind. Humanity was curious. Humanity would greet you with open hands and offer friendship freely. They built hospitals on colony worlds and shared technology with younger species. They sent aid to planets in crisis and mediated disputes between neighbors. But if you harmed them, if you hurt their children, and laughed while you did it, they would come for you. Not in anger, but in certainty. Not in haste, but in cold, patient determination. And they would not stop until the scales were balanced. The galaxy had been at peace for 50 years. No species had committed an atrocity since the fall of the Vethkai. Disputes were settled through negotiation. Conflicts ended before they began. The memorial on New Valencia served as a constant reminder of what happened when justice was denied. Some said humanity had made the galaxy a better place through fear. Others said they had simply shown what consequences looked like. The truth was probably somewhere in between. On the anniversary of New Valencia, humans across the galaxy lit candles and read names. 10 million names, spoken aloud, so they would never be forgotten. It was a ritual of memory and warning.